In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that King Purple Bell did not hesitate to burn and consume over 20% of his divine body, manipulated a top-tier fire god origin crystal to its utmost potential, ultimately forcing King Song Jin to self-destruct and perish. After the battle, he was exhilarated and eagerly began collecting the spoils and fallen treasures, yet the ultimate target of his expedition, the treasure chest, remained nowhere in sight. If it had been Luo Feng, given his status as a world master of the primordial void space, he likely would have ignored those scattered metal fragments while clearing the battlefield. After all, unless the price was exorbitant or the quantity overwhelming, ordinary metal could generally be applied for free within his clan. King Purple Bell, however, was different. He was born in a vassal branch of the automaton race. His access to cultivation resources and treasures was far less smooth than that of core automaton members. Even metal fragments, if of the high-grade G-class material, could accumulate into a substantial profit, so he naturally wouldn't let them go easily. However, when he casually attempted to store a seemingly ordinary G-class metal fragment into his space ring, it was strangely rejected and could not be contained. That fragment was, in fact, a disguise created by Luo Feng's Clan clone. It's worth mentioning that, unlike a world ring, a space ring cannot store living beings. Since the fragment was rejected, Luo Feng unhesitatingly dropped the disguise and switched to his human body. That Luo Feng remained completely unharmed under such terrifying power left King Purple Bell and all the observing natives in the monitoring room utterly shocked. For the natives present, even with one peak King Immortal and two high-tier King Immortals giving them a numerical advantage, they still lacked the strength to slay Luo Feng and King Purple Bell. Years of lying dormant had left them without powerful weapons which were enough to turn the tide. At this moment, if they revealed themselves rashly, it would only result in a needless death. Moreover, their most important objective, the clan's legacy, was already in hand. Raising their descendants was fundamental, while the treasure had become secondary. To avoid unnecessary complications, they had no choice but to retreat to the Divine Kingdom. As for King Purple Bell, he had burned more than 20% of his divine body to activate the heavy treasure and the fire god origin crystal. Combined with the destructive force of King Song Jin's self-detonation, the devastation reached unprecedented levels. Yet, even with all that, he still could not eliminate Luo Feng. This moment sealed the fate of the ultimate treasure where it was never meant for King Purple Bell. Despite this, whether it was the remnants of the native clan's treasure or the secrets he refused to reveal, King Purple Bell would never allow Luo Feng to leave alive, especially since he considered himself superior in terms of cultivation level. But in terms of speed, Luo Feng far outmatched him. Effortlessly, Luo Feng slipped from view, exited the sacrificial tower, and transformed into the golden horned beast, waiting for King Purple Bell to make his move. Although frustrated, King Purple Bell could do nothing but chase desperately, confident that once outside the tower, his teleportation abilities would allow him to kill Luo Feng. After all, Luo Feng could not teleport. However, the moment he flew out of the tower, he was suddenly struck by a terrifying attack. Although in terms of law's comprehension, Luo Feng was only at the high-tier Marquis Immortal level, thanks to the King Great Armor, Beast God transformation, and the tenfold law affinity boosted by Blood River's power, the Golden Horned Beast's combat strength had already soared to peak King Immortal level. One strike unleashed, its ferocity tore through space itself, sending shockwaves across the void, and both were dragged into the spatial rift by the overwhelming force. During the previous fierce battle, King Purple Bell had lost over 20% of his divine body, leaving his strength at less than half of his peak. The golden beast before him, suspected to be King Silver Wing, moved far faster than he could keep up with. Knowing he had no chance of victory, no matter how unwilling he was, he had no choice but to teleport away. Moreover, once they left the sacrificial tower, they could reconnect to the military system. By his estimation, Luo Feng, who had escaped earlier, had likely already contacted allies or reinforcements, and the sudden appearance of this King Silver Wing was direct proof of that. If he continued to fight now, once Luo Feng's other reinforcements arrived, he would be trapped in a hopeless situation. After weighing the risks, escaping was the only viable choice. Haunted by caution, King Purple Bell was ultimately forced to retreat. Seeing this, Luo Feng immediately piloted his spaceship away from the tower. At the same time, he deployed his Clan clone and used the innate secret technique to perfectly replicate Zhou Qika's life essence, successfully deceiving the treasure chest's detection system. Combined with the talisman, he was able to fully open it. Although the chest contained only 3 world rings, they held the cumulative wealth of 1% of an entire clan. Its value was astronomical. This included vast cultivation resources and weapons suitable for world master level and below, as well as items and weapons reserved for immortal-level powerhouses. Even a single world ring held treasures worth over 200 billion mixed yuan units. Coupled with the relics of King Songjin, this treasure hunt skyrocketed Luo Feng's personal fortune by at least 500 billion mixed yuan units, which comparable to the total wealth of an average invincible king immortal, and even some lower-tier universe venerables. Among all his gains, the item Luo Feng valued most was a rare treasure comparable in worth to a universe venerable's weapon. Its significance lay not in raw destructive power, but in the unique ability it granted its wielder, the power to enforce spatial lockdown. Even without any understanding of the original law of space, the user could still manipulate spatial restrictions, ignoring the limitations of the universe itself. This weapon is a legendary creation of the universe venerables of the Yenji continent, crafted uniquely through sacrificial scriptures and held in the highest regard. Across the entire universe, fewer than 100 of these exist. Possessing it allows even a king immortal who cultivates the time original law to effortlessly enforce spatial lockdown. It should be noted that the original laws of time and space each have their own heaven-defying divine techniques, time as time pause, and space as teleportation. It is an undeniable fact that a limit king immortal is 10 times stronger than a peak king immortal. However, the original laws of space and time do not overlap. If a peak king immortal of the space faction insists on escaping via teleportation, even a limit king immortal of the time faction would struggle to stop them. Yet, once a peak king immortal of the time faction wields this weapon, it effectively strips the space faction's masters of their teleportation ability, while leaving their own time-based techniques completely unaffected. After all, the ability to restrict teleportation alone is enough to turn the tide in a life-or-death duel between top-tier powerhouses. This is precisely why this weapon is comparable to a universe venerable great artifact and why its value is truly incalculable. On the surface, this heaven-defying weapon appears to benefit the time faction the most, but for Luo Feng, its significance is equally profound. First, spatial lockdown is one of the 3 greatest mysteries of the original law of space. If Luo Feng can wield it, unless someone has a basic understanding of the sacrificial tower's scriptures, they will assume his power comes from his mastery of the law itself and will never doubt his identity as a king immortal. Second, Luo Feng is renowned for his speed, especially his golden horned beast, which moves several times faster than his human body. When combined with this weapon in enforcing spatial lockdown, the enemy loses their teleportation ability. Among peak king immortals, how many could possibly go head-to-head against the golden horned beast? Moreover, Luo Feng has already created a pinnacle secret technique rivaling even invincible king immortal or low-tier universe venerables. With this secret technique, his golden horned beast, though at peak king immortal level, can rank among the very top-tier powerhouses. However, this weapon ultimately defies the laws of the universe. According to the law of balance, its use inevitably requires an immense price, the expenditure of vast amounts of immortal divine power as an energy source. This does not mean that Luo Feng, at the world master level, cannot wield it. In fact, there already exist items in the universe capable of supplying immortal divine power to instruments or mechanical weapons, such as the fire god origin crystal Luo Feng previously purchased. After testing, he was extremely satisfied with this weapon's performance. The spatial lockdown it produces is so perfect that even his Masha clan clone, who favored by the original law of space, senses no spatial fluctuation, and this indistinguishable from a true king immortal executing spatial lockdown. Even more astonishing, the weapon allows the user to freely adjust the coverage range of the spatial lockdown at will. What shocked Luo Feng, however, was the enormous energy cost to activate it was almost staggering. By equivalent conversion, each use even for just 1 second requires at least 200,000 points. While clashes among immortals rarely exceed 3 minutes, a typical battle still lasts several tens of seconds. In other words, if Luo Feng intends to fight using this weapon, the cost would be nearly equivalent to spending the entire wealth of a marquee immortal, and possibly even more. It is conceivable that if one were to directly supply energy from their own immortal divine power, even a marquee immortal would be drained completely within just a few minutes, ultimately collapsing from exhaustion. For this reason, Luo Feng could never use it recklessly. After all, not every battle presents an opportunity, and not every strike guarantees a rich reward. Acting without restraint would very likely deplete his entire wealth. After studying the transcendent weapon, Luo Feng, with Babata's assistance, began categorizing the remaining spoils of war. Items suitable for his use or extremely rare treasures were kept, while the rest were sold to convert into wealth. Meanwhile, a rumor about him obtaining the treasure from the sacrificial tower quietly began circulating across the Yenji continent. The one behind this was none other than the King Purple Bell. As one of the few survivors of that treasure battle, he had already sworn an undying enmity against Luo Feng. More importantly, Luo Feng knew that the King Purple Bell possessed a heavy treasure but chose to remain silent. It should be noted, when a strong powerhouse discovers that an enemy's hidden asset is a treasure that doesn't match their apparent strength, yet they choose not to reveal it, it signifies confidence or an intent to personally seize it. Luo Feng was indeed like this. He had planned that once he became stronger, if the King Purple Bell still roamed the Yenji continent, he would personally kill him and claim the treasure. As a result, the next encounter between the two would inevitably end with one's demise. The King Purple Bell could not tolerate such a threat and decided to strike first, secretly spreading news that Luo Feng had obtained the sacrificial tower's treasure. As the rumor spread, more and more powerful figures, even joining forces, attempted to breach the tower to verify the claim. Once they confirmed the truth from the remaining battle traces inside, the Yenji continent erupted in turmoil. Countless alien elites began hunting Luo Feng relentlessly, yet all their efforts proved futile. They had no idea that at this moment, Luo Feng was still at the military base, handling and selling the treasures from the sacrificial tower that were of no use to him. He then invested the enormous proceeds into various resources that could help the Golden Horned Beast and Mo Yun Vine enhance their strength. At the same time, he purchased a few Fire God Origin crystals and a large quantity of Water God Origin crystals suitable for supplying energy to Space Lockdown weapon. After all, the original law of water better manifests wave-like properties, not only making it more compatible with the weapon's characteristics but also being cheaper than the Fire God Origin crystals, making it the superior choice. In fact, what Luo Feng desired most was to help Irina break through to the immortal level. Once the Zerg Queen reached immortal level, she would be an invincible force just below the universe venerable, allowing Luo Feng to roam freely on extraterritorial battlefield without encountering any truly life-threatening enemies. Unfortunately, as a sentient being, Irina could not rely solely on external items to achieve immortality. The only path was through her own comprehension of the original laws. The problem was that Irina's life gene level was higher than that of the Golden Horned Beast. Breaking through to a mortal level would be several times more difficult than for the Golden Horned Beast, requiring an extremely high understanding of the original law of space, almost complete enlightenment. Even though she had already fully mastered the origin law of fire, she remained at the World Master level, unable to take that next step. Of course, in terms of overall strength, a World Master Zerghive still surpassed a human immortal army lord, which was an inevitable outcome dictated by the universe balance law. Realizing he could not directly help Irina reach immortality, Luo Feng instead turned to seek weapons or items capable of threatening the lives of King Immortals. However, weapons able to kill beings below the universe venerable with a single strike were astronomically expensive. Luo Feng could neither afford them nor risk possessing them, as it would attract countless powerful adversaries to converge in contest, placing him in extreme danger. In the end, Luo Feng had no choice but to settle for a secondary option, spending at least half of the funds from his previous treasure sales to purchase highly effective yet inconspicuous venom. In fact, with a sufficient dose, even an invincible King Immortal like King Jinyan could meet their demise, as the venom would corrode their immortal body to destruction. Therefore, Luo Feng handled the venom with extreme caution. He first ran nearly 1,000 simulations in the virtual universe, even having his Masha clan clone temper his G-grade metal battle blade with venom inside an empty world ring, rather than operating within his internal world. After all, even if the Masha clan clone were instantly killed upon contact with the venom, the Golden Horned Beast could easily regenerate another clone. Conversely, if even a single drop of venom accidentally entered his internal world, it could corrode it and lead to Luo Feng's demise. Imagine, if Luo Feng combined the use of the Space Lockdown weapon and the venom, with his speed, how many opponents below peak King Immortal level could escape his attack? Of course, this does not mean Luo Feng is invincible. The venom is terrifying, but it must directly contact the immortal body to take effect. However, almost all powerhouses on the extraterritorial battlefield wear metal armor. This also explains why Luo Feng spent roughly 100 million points to custom make a battle blade from expensive G-grade metal, designed to pierce enemy defenses and allow the venom to reach maximum effect. Once the Golden Horned Beast and Mo Yun Vine had fully enhanced their strength, Luo Feng, fully armed, returned to the battlefield. He even sent mass messages requesting all human faction King Immortals on the Yenji continent to assist in tracking King Purple Bell. So, will Luo Feng succeed in killing King Purple Bell and claiming the precious treasure he carries? How will he intimidate the King Immortals who covet his own treasures? Stay tuned for the next spoiler, where I will reveal it all. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.